think we're live. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Office Hours. Let's see if we can get some confirmation that I am live. One of these days, I'm going to start trusting it, but not today. All right, here's one little sign of life from John. I am heard. Ah, oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, we are back. It's Friday again. Hello, John. Hello, Ewan. Hello, Linus. Hello, Sharnigan Ninja. We have a real-life ninja in the chat. That's awesome. So we're going to do what we always do on Fridays, which is talk about SerenityOS. So it's 4 p.m. Swedish time. Whatever you want to talk about SerenityOS, that's what we're going to talk about. And if you have technical, non-technical questions, now is a great time. Something that often happens, though, is that like right in the last 10 minutes of office hours, somebody asks like some technical question that requires going in depth. And I always feel bad about not being able to answer it in depth. And then I forget what it is, and now it's office hours again. So if you have some question that you would like to know more about, the earlier you can ask about it, the better. Just saying, because it is always a bit sad when we run out of time. All right, more people showing up. Hey, Tim. Hey, Sophia. Hey, Umberto. Undefined. And Ali and Steven. Look at all these golden yaks. So good to see you using those, and thanks for the support. Lofty says, see, but I asked my question so early. It was in last episode's office hours. See, that's the spirit. That's exactly what I want you to do. So thank you for doing that. So very unusually, I have not been working directly on SerenityOS for like multiple weeks in a row. I've been doing kind of side quest, I guess, and I'm not quite finished with it yet. But when I do, I'm going to, of course, show you all the results. So I'm like a little bit behind on what's going on with Serenity. So I guess today we'll get a chance to catch ourselves up. And actually, I'm going to have to catch up tomorrow anyway, because I'm making the monthly update video. So, but even so, there might be something today. We'll see. Andre says, hello, Andreas. Hello, Andre. Have you ever considered implementing something similar to better enums for use in Serenity? Better enums, is that like a brand name of something I should know about? Better enums, clean, reflective compile time enums. So this is definitely something that bothers C++ developers eventually, every now and then, like the lack of compile time reflection in C++. So it's something that we've talked about on various occasions, and we don't have like specifically this type of thing, but we do have helpers for like doing bit flag manipulation and stuff like that. So we have this header called enumbits, enumbits.h. I think Brian invented this whole thing. Yeah. And it's basically, if you use this macro, then you get bitwise operators for an enum. So we do have like some hacks to improve the enum experience, but we didn't go as far as what I assume this does. And maybe that's something worth looking into. Yeah. So I'm not super familiar with the capabilities of a system like this. So let's see, what can you do? You enable it, sure, include it, you declare your enum, and then you get a from string and to string helper, sure. You can iterate them, you know how many there are. Well, that sounds really useful. So what we typically do is hacks, basically, for these things. So we would have something like a count enum value at the very end of an enum, and this is sort of the same as I guess what this thing does here. But obviously, if you can do that in a uniform way, it's definitely nicer. I think we should probably consider doing something similar to this. It seems like a generally good idea. Just have to look at how to actually implement it. And Linus says, another custom enum thingy we have is arbitrary sized enum. Ooh, is that Linus plugging his own classes? Let's find out. Who made this? Well, look at that. So what does this do? It's presumably an arbitrary sized enum. So you can have an enum of any field size? That sounds really interesting. How do we use this? Wait, what? Where do we use this? Oh, here. Oh, make arbitrary sized enum. So you make a 256-bit enum field. I see. So it's not just for enums, but like particularly useful for a bit field where you have more bits than you can fit in a 64-bit int. Yeah, exactly. Like the Intel CPU features. Intel puts so many freaking features into their CPU that you need a 256-bit bit field just to have a bit for each feature. That's awesome. So very interesting. Yeah. Right. So it's similar to distinct numeric. Cool. I have to. I remember being irritated that I couldn't do this with something in, I think it was in user space emulator. So maybe I need to figure out what that was and see if I can use this. But very cool thing to have. Let's see. Dither8 says, hey Andreas, have you seen the Northmen? I have not seen the Northmen. What is the Northmen? It is some type of movie. This looks very Hollywood Nordic. But it has a real live Swedish person in it, so probably somewhat authentic. You gotta check that out. Okay, so Jean-Baptiste says, hey Andreas, any thoughts on IPv4 subnet mask versus sitter notation for UI dialogues? Ooh, very, I already like what this discussion sounds like it might be about. So let's go and look at that pull request. Or issues, rather. No, it's a pull request. Wait, why does it show as an issue here when it's clearly a pull request? Strange. Okay, so this UI uses classical subnet masks, you know, as you would see on most operating systems, 255, 255, 255.0. And that's obviously a /24 mask. So then there's a debate on using something like this instead. And all right. So I'm skipping, not reading what anybody's saying, just looking at the screenshots and inferring the debate. But I think this is definitely really cool. And I'm not sure if there is a use case for a custom subnet masks. Like, what would you even need that for unless you're, I don't know. No, what would you even need that for? Like, when would you want a subnet mask that doesn't end in a, that's not like a bunch of ones followed by a bunch of zeros, right? Or a bunch of arbitrary stuff followed by a bunch of zeros, let's say. Interesting. Yeah, that seems like a cool idea. I wonder if it would be helpful if like it would sort of display the legacy format or whatever alongside of it, so that if you click here, like to go up and down, it will sort of change. So you see what the 255, 255, 255, 254, whatever mask is, depending on, I don't know. Because while I understand how this mask works, and most people here probably do, there's probably also people who are not familiar with this notation and would be more familiar with the like more stringified notation or whatever. I don't know. No, I think this is cool. It's definitely says power user, right? It has that good power user flavor, so I like it. Let's see. Mitchell says, "Happy Friday. The closet is back." Yes, back in the closet every Friday. Ominous Liticus says, "Well, hello friends. A while ago you posted a video about how redeveloping a browser or even operating system may be pointless, as one could get a very similar Serenity experience by customizing a desktop. Any more thoughts?" Well, my main thought about that is that that video was an April Fool's joke. So to anybody who didn't understand that, it was a joke, and I don't think building Serenity is pointless, and I don't think that the Chicago 95 is a particularly good substitute for what we're doing. It was just a joke. Hey Samuel. Kenneth says, "Looks like the Northmen is missing a vital feature like a Norwegian, for example." That's fair. That's fair. You need the Nordic trifecta or whatever, or Scandinavian trifecta if you prefer. Let's see. Wicked Energy says, "How do you develop the GUI for SerenityOS? Is there some kind of toolkit you developed to make it easier?" Sure, we've made our own toolkit for it. It's called libgui, and it's part of the codebase. So if you open up our codebase and you go in userland libraries libgui, this is where you find all of our GUI classes that you can use to compose the various UIs that we have. So every GUI application in Serenity uses libgui. They all share the code for all of the common widgets like buttons, labels, stuff like that. Sorry, just messing with my microphone. Yeah, so libgui, definitely the place to look if you want to see how our GUI is built. Martin says, "Some systems, Windows 10 at least, already use this notation for subnet masks." Okay, that's cool. I don't think, I mean, I'm just using Mate here, so it's kind of like, I guess, outdated in many ways. But yeah, they definitely use this old style notation. But yeah, if like mainstream systems are using sitter notation, then it seems perfectly reasonable for us to do that as well. Mati says, "Do you think that programming can be an addiction?" Sure, I think, I mean, there's definitely such a thing as a psychological addiction, right? Not all addictions are chemical or physiological. There's also addictive behavior and addictive patterns that just manifest in what you do every day. And programming can definitely be such a thing. And I guess I've seen that in myself many times, that I sort of, I catch myself programming not because, not always because I enjoy it, but because I feel like a compulsion to do it. Much less nowadays than in the past, But yeah, it's definitely something that can be addictive. Although, I mean, with many things, especially like me personally, having a lot of experience with like chemical addictions, it seems to me that an addiction to programming can be relatively healthy compared to many other addictions. And I wouldn't sweat it so much unless it sort of escalates. That's really the main thing to look for in any addiction. Like, is there a pattern of escalation? If you are just doing something, maybe you're doing a bit too much of it, but it doesn't escalate, then it's not necessarily that dangerous. Maybe it's just a bad habit. That's what I would think about it. And when I was in rehab, we talked a lot about like substituting addictions as sort of a way to springboard into a healthier life. I remember my counselor there, he would tell me that if I want to go home and eat a whole bag of cinnamon rolls, I should just do it and not worry about getting fat, because it's better that I get really fat than I relapse and start using drugs again. And I don't know, I kind of really took that with me as a way of sort of thinking about the relative danger of different addictions, I guess, and to not worry too much about less harmful addictions, unless there's a pattern of escalation. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on these things. I'm just some guy with specific personal experiences, so that's all that I have to offer. Dither8 says Thoughtsitter was a Cisco thing. Oh, it might be, actually. I don't actually know what it stands for. Classless interdomain routing. Well, it doesn't sound like a Cisco thing. Sounds like a some kind of a standard thing. From the IETF. Cool. Pablo says, hey, I'm thinking of quitting my corporate job to work full-time on my side projects. Any advice or tips on doing that? Do you ever think of going back to working at Apple, for example? Well, I don't really think about it, no. But to tell you the truth, I sometimes have nightmares about it. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night in a nightmare where I think that I'm back working at some big tech company, and I feel stressed out about whatever it is that I'm doing and the things I'm not able to do. And the dreams are always a little bit different every time, but there's usually this feeling of, I don't know, like this loss of freedom, I guess. That's, at least while I worked at Apple, that was a very strong feeling for me, that it took away some of my personal freedom, and not working there anymore does feel quite nice. I don't hold it against them, though, because that's just how that company is, and you can be very, very happy and you can thrive in that environment. But it is something that I felt I was losing while I was there, and that's giving me nightmares occasionally. But thankfully I wake up and I remember, oh, no, wait a minute, I'm just doing open source stuff now. It's all good. But any tips on quitting your corporate job to work full-time on side projects? I guess it really depends on how you plan to support yourself. If you have savings, for example, you can totally quit your corporate job and burn savings for a while, just focus on your side projects and try to reorient yourself in your life, figure out what you want to do next. And I guess find yourself, for lack of a better term. That's definitely something you can do. If you don't have savings to burn, you do obviously need to find some way to support yourself in the meantime. And that's definitely worth thinking about before you quit your job. I would tell that to anybody. And at least from my personal experience, it takes time to build up a monetization around random side projects. Like it took me years to build up consistent monetization of my work on SerenityOS, for example. So it's not like, it's not something that's easy or something you can just like flick a switch and now you're monetizing your side projects. Like you need to actually work on that. And yeah, I guess my advice is to figure out how you're going to support yourself and then go for it. Because if you're not happy in your corporate job today, I don't think any amount of corporate incentives are going to make you happier. You're going to have to make yourself happier, and that might like taking a break from your job and focusing on things that you truly enjoy might be the best way to get started on figuring that out. Yeah, that would be my advice. And then we have a super chat from Tim. Thank you very much, Tim. Tim says, "Hello, Andreas. I'm on a plane." That reminds me of that song, "I'm on a boat." Anyway, will you talk a bit about how you manage the Serenity open source software community, trusting people, and finally, respectfully turning away low quality contributions? Ooh, these are heavy topics, Tim. Let's talk about them. So, managing the Serenity community is, to a large extent, pretty easy. And I think a large part of that is because of the sort of the relative complexity of what we do. It's kind of naturally repelling complete beginners. So people who enter into our project typically already have a fair amount of programming experience, a fair amount of like open source development experience and so on. So that really helps us. But we do also get beginners, of course, both in programming, in C++, and in community participation. So it's not like it's not happening. How I manage it, I guess it's been a process for me to discover how to do that, because as you know, like I started the project by myself, and then people sort of organically joined it over time. And that's given me the very nice opportunity to sort of slowly learn how to do this and experimenting as I go. For the first, I don't remember, first 2 years, I think, I was doing all of the issue management and pull request merging and all that stuff by myself, because I guess I didn't really trust anybody 100%. And I felt scared to give other people control. But it got to a point where like the scariest thing wasn't losing control anymore. The scariest thing was just being buried under this avalanche of stuff I had to do. That became more scary than giving up some control. So, and I think the first time I really faced that was when I talked with JT on the Systems with JT channel. I did an interview with them. I don't remember when it was exactly, but we can find it on the Googles, I guess. You know what? Let's use Bing. Let's promote the underdog here. So, wait, what? Andreas Kling, senior software developer? Oh, wow. Bing is showing me the alternate reality me. That's very interesting. Here we are, interview with JT. When was that? That was April 2021. That was, in that discussion, we ended up talking about a project governance and like managing the all the pull requests and stuff. And I kind of realized in real time that what I'm doing is unsustainable and that it's something that has to change. And shortly after that, I kind of meditated on it and accepted that I have to give some powers to somebody else to help me with this. So I went and I asked Linus to help me out with it, and thankfully he said yes, and I'm super grateful for that, because Linus has been an absolutely amazing resource to our community, and continues to do like just awesome work. And I mean, it was like the best possible thing I could have ever done for the project was to ask Linus to to be a co-maintainer. But at the time, it was terrifying. The idea that like I'm just gonna let this other person have the ability to say yes and no to things, where I used to be the only person in charge. But I don't know. I feel like whenever you're at a position in life where you have to decide whether to give up control or keep control, it's a very pivotal thing. And I think in this case, it was obviously the right choice. And it also made it so much easier going forward, because then I could also invite other people. So I invited Ali to do it a little bit later, and then I invited Gunnar and Brian and Edon and Tim. And it's been, I don't know, it's been challenging, but less and less challenging every time. So I guess in some ways I have to thank Linus for for making me trust other people, because he did such a good job with the responsibilities I asked him to take on, that it made me feel like, okay, well, this is actually something I can trust other people with. Anyway, yeah, it's been a process for sure. And I don't feel like there hasn't really been a situation with like abuse of trust or anything like that. So if that would ever happen, like if somebody would do something that I feel is completely detrimental to the project, or like somebody would like actively harm the project in some way, I guess I would have to react to that. But thankfully nothing like that has happened, because everybody is really chill and nice, and I don't foresee any such problem ever really happening. But it could, you never know what happens in other people's lives, and we'll have to see what the future holds. One thing is that I would like to try to keep the number of maintainers small, because it's not that I don't really think of maintainers as like a prestigious position, right? I think of it as somebody who decides to offer a bunch of labor to help the project move forward. And a smaller number of maintainers keeps a tighter vision and a tighter project. Whereas if the more people you add, sort of the more diluted it becomes. But by no means is a maintainer supposed to be like, oh, this person is like better than anybody else in the project, right? It's nothing like that. It's just somebody that I've asked to take on responsibility to help move the project forward. And I am really grateful for everybody who has agreed to do that so far. And we'll see how it scales into the future. With regards to respectfully turning away low quality contributions, that's definitely a tricky thing, but I find that you have to be clear with people, and it's better to be fast instead of something I do wrong frequently is that I postpone addressing things that, if there's a pull request of particularly low quality, for example, it needs a lot of work before it could even be considered for merging. A mistake I often make is to not actually address that, but like instead look at individual little things and say like, oh, this thing isn't right, this thing isn't right, and this thing isn't right, when the message I should be putting out is really, this is not very good on the whole, and we need to have sort of a conversation about how we can improve it. And it's hard sometimes to quantify what makes something low quality. It's certainly harder than to nitpick little individual things, but I think for the long-term health of your project, and also for like the mutual benefit of you and the contributor, it's important to actually take the time to have that conversation about like what makes this generally low quality and how can we improve it. And I fully admit that I am bad at this. I'm even bad at realizing that I need to be doing it, but I do what I can to try to improve that. And one of the ways that I've tried to improve that, and that we try to improve that in Serenity, is by having kind of very detailed documentation in our contribution guidelines about what makes a good PR, or like what are the do's and don'ts of a good pull request. Because I find that if you can refer to a resource, then it's so much easier to have that conversation instead of you having to sort of re-articulate those things every time. You can point to this document and say like, oh, well, the issues with this pull request that make it generally low quality are this and that thing in the contribution guidelines. And our contribution guidelines is a living document for sure, because it keeps growing, shrinking, and getting more detailed, or we just keep editing it as we sort of learn how to moderate this process, or how to modulate this process. And I think that's probably the best systemic tool that we have for guiding new contributions, or steering them towards quality. But yeah, it does require a bit of manual attendance, or like you have to guide this process. Like, it's not, if somebody comes in with a low quality contribution, it's not enough to just point them at a link to the contribution guidelines and say, please follow the contribution guidelines, right? Because if it were that easy, they would have already done it. Because, you know, it's not hard to find it. It's linked on the pull request page, so you have to assume that people have seen it, but they need some help interpreting it and applying what's in the guidelines to their work. And this is definitely an area where encouraging other people to do code review helps a lot. So in Serenity, we encourage everybody to participate in code review. So maintainers are just the people who press the button in the end, but everybody is encouraged. Please review any code that you're interested in. Please review even code if you're not an expert, but you can still like learn about the code by reviewing somebody's changes to it. And let's have conversations with each other about this. And by sort of distributing this process across all of our community members, it makes it a lot easier to do this at scale, I think. So, man, that was a bit of a long-winded point, but I hope that made sense. Yes. And in the end, of course, if you have to respectfully turn it away because it cannot be salvaged, I feel like I forgot to address that, then, as you say, respectfully, right? You have to just say, well, respectfully, I don't think this is right for our project. It's not a good fit. And then you respectfully articulate the reason why it's not a good fit. And, you know, just be honest about it. Like, if it's something that you think, well, the idea is good in in theory, but the implementation is bad, then you can just find a way to say that nicely, right? But if it's a feature that you don't like and you're not going to like it for the project, no matter how polished it gets, then be honest and upfront about that. I think when it comes to being respectful about turning down work, the single most respectful thing you can do is preventing people from wasting their time, right? So by stringing somebody along and not cutting them off right away, you are disrespecting their time. But if you know in your heart that this will never be accepted because it's not going to happen, then the sooner you say that, the more respectful you are, I think, because then they don't waste their time on it. Yes, hope that answers the question. And thank you for the super chat, Tim. Let's see. Ditherate says, I still dream I'm in my last year in high school sometimes, don't worry. Yes, I also do that. I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and I think, oh my God, I'm late for class again. And then I realize I'm 37 years old and everything is fine. Sophia says, have you looked at GUI.OS? If so, what do you like about it? I have looked at it a few times and I like the pixel art styles that they have. I mean, I know that they have a lot of vector stuff, but I like the art style. It is very quaint. I used to use BOS icon theme for KDE back in, I don't know, 2001 or something like that. Definitely like the look of it. I've also looked at the code and I felt a bit like, oh, this isn't really a code base that I would want to work on personally. But visually speaking, it is quite attractive, I would say. So I like the general visual style. I like some of their architectural stuff, like these, they have this package file system thing that's kind of neat. But I don't think I know enough about Haiku to really have an opinion about it. So the way that you phrased this, like what do you like about it, is actually a good way to phrase it, because I can certainly tell you I like the visual style, but I can't tell you any deeper opinion about it. Jonas says, are we running all of our software through a browser in the future, do you think? Will the powerful home computer disappear? I don't know. I kind of think that people are always going to want to have high-powered computation devices to play games. That seems to be something that is going to keep driving personal computers for at least for the foreseeable future. Because if you look at something like VR, for example, it seems highly unlikely that you would get acceptable latency for over the internet or like over the network VR with like the ridiculous latency requirements for like these headset displays. So I think we're going to want to have, for like the best possible experience with stuff like that, you're going to want to have a really, really powerful computer close to yourself. And at the same time, like maybe not everybody will have a computer at home anymore. Maybe there was a range of time where it made sense for like the average family to have a computer at home. I think we are sort of after that time window now. People have a computer at home if they have a gamer in the family, but I know many families that only have an iPad, for example, or some kind of a tablet, but they don't have a desktop or laptop computer. And they seem to be perfectly happy that way. Seems a bit strange to me to not have a computer, but but we're all different, right? Andrew Castor says, I saw you try to yak bait me into writing a blog post on last week's office hours. How did you set up your blog? Is it a one-click setup plus a text file kind of thing? Aha. Yes, I use this thing called Jekyll Now, I think. Yeah, this thing is, I use that for my blog. And I would show you my local setup, but I actually have a bunch of posts that I'm working on that I don't want to show people just yet. So I can just say that this is the way it looks publicly, right? So it just I push to my little GitHub repo, and it updates this site automatically based on the content of the repo. So it's super handy. And you can run a local instance of Jekyll with a handy command. So definitely recommend it if you don't want to do a lot of things with your setup. I'm sure you can customize it also. I didn't spend any time customizing because I don't know. Didn't feel like it yet. Salman says, I'm working in a Y Combinator funded product company in Pakistan, but I feel like this won't help me get a job in big tech abroad. Should I switch to a multinational that would look good on my resume? Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer because I've just haven't spent enough time in the hiring pipeline at big tech to know like this kind of subtle difference between like how do you gauge a candidate, like is a Y Combinator funded product company better or worse than a multinational? I think probably the answer is that like for some positions it looks better to have a YC background, and for other things a multinational background will look better. I guess the answer is really that it depends on what kind of job you're trying to get in big tech abroad. If you're trying to get like a more traditional big tech company job, like more old school, like Oracle or IBM or something like that, I would imagine that they would look more favorably on multinational experience already. But whereas maybe one of the slightly younger companies like Apple, Google, Meta, or whatever, like they might be equally or more interested in somebody with a more startup-like background. But I don't know for sure, so I can't really tell you something. I can't answer the question without feeling like I'm talking out of my ass. So I'm just gonna say I don't know. Let's see. Hey, Valtteri. And Mati asks, is there any alternative to Regedit on Serenity? We do not have an alternative to Regedit, but it's actually something I was thinking about making, because we have the .config directory where your various app configurations are neatly organized into files. And if you open them up, they are neatly organized into categories and so on. I mean, they're just ini files. But you can totally imagine a Regedit-like application that simply walks this directory and exposes this as sort of a tree structure where you can edit the various things. That could be a very, very fun app to have, I think. Actually, you probably wouldn't walk the tree structure in the editor. Rather, you would query our config server. So we already have, everybody connects to temp portal config to talk to config server. So I guess they would use config server to enumerate all the possible things. We would need to add some API. Let's see how this thing works. Config, pixel paint, pixel grid show. True. Yeah. So that would be a pretty sweet thing. Ecoptic said, hello, Andreas. How are you? I am pretty good. Thank you for asking. How are you? Also, I'm sorry for always getting so far behind in these streams. let's see. Gilberti says, what are your resources for learning operating system? Well, I guess the main resource I would suggest if you want to learn, for lack of a better term or lack of a more specific term, operating systems, I would definitely recommend the osdev.org wiki. It is a fantastic resource for anybody who wants to build a kernel. And if you've never done anything like that before, you can learn everything you need on this site. You definitely get to a point where you outgrow the site, obviously. Like it's a beginner and intermediate resource, I would say. But if you are a beginner to operating systems and kernels, then that's definitely a good place to start. And yeah, just go to osdev.org and find yourself the introduction right here. Clickety clack. And I will hear back from you when you have built your first kernel. Let's see. Vamos says, what are your views on Leadcode interview approach used by Fang? And when you were at Apple and Nokia, what was your way of interviewing candidates? And what do you look for in a candidate? So my general views on Leadcode interviews are that you don't really need to do Leadcode if you instead work on your computer science fundamentals. So if you maintain your strength with data structures and algorithms and sort of regularly practice using data structures and algorithms, and you don't just write high-level code, then you don't really need to like grind out these practice problems over and over, which, you know, some people or many people argue that you have to practice Leadcode, but I'm kind of suspicious of that claim because there's also this whole industry around interview preparation, and I feel like there's a lot of financial incentives for people to convince you that you need Leadcode and Leadcode-like approaches. That said, I'm aware that there are many people who are convinced of this in hiring positions as well. So it's kind of it's an unfortunate self-perpetuating problem because I guess companies hire people who believe that you need Leadcode to get a job, and then they interview people and they perpetuate this idea that you need Leadcode by forcing candidates to do Leadcode problems. But yeah, as I said, I still believe that if you just maintain strong fundamentals, you don't actually need to practice Leadcode and stuff like that. You can solve these problems from first principles if you just have a decent repertoire of basic skills. When I was at Apple and Nokia, what was my way of interviewing candidates? So what I would do is usually we would have something like 45 minutes to talk to a candidate. So I like to just talk about stuff that they work on and trying to find out what they enjoy about programming. But then we had to do some kind of programming problem because it was part of the curriculum or whatever that we had to do that. And I would usually do some pretty simple problem, but custom enough that it wouldn't be something that people practice. So one thing I often ask people would be like, can you write me a so this was for a C++ position. So I would ask somebody, can you write me a vector class in C++, like a simple vector that has an append function, and then give me a way to iterate the vector. And just to see people write out some template code and make a simple thing that can dynamically reallocate. It was, in my experience at least, I just want to see people program. I don't want to see them, I don't necessarily want to see people struggle in an interview. I just want to see somebody programming. So that's what I was looking for. And I knew that my coworkers were going to press them on like these brain teasers and stuff. Like there's always people who do that, but I don't know. I guess I always thought of programming as more of a craft, like something like blacksmithing or whatever. So I just want to see them make a horseshoe. I don't need to see them make some super crazy thing. But it usually went fine. And from my perspective, the reason to interview people and to do coding questions is it's not to make people uncomfortable. It's not to be elitist. It's really to filter out people who are misrepresenting their skills, because that is, in my experience, that is a very real problem that you have at big tech companies. Like I've interviewed a lot of people who specified a lot of skills on their resume that they simply could not reproduce in person. And that was pretty awkward, to be honest, but you kind of get used to being nice about it. And then the HR person does the actual the actual letting them down. But in my mind, that's always what we were trying to filter out, was just people who were misrepresenting their skills. And what do I look for in candidates? I look for people, for me personally, I look for people who enjoy programming, like people who are just in the game because they love the game. And that's my personal bias. I know some people feel like you shouldn't have to love programming to be a programmer, but because I love it so much, I have this strong bias, I guess, that I want to work with other people who also love it. So that's the main thing I've always been looking for, is just to find other people who love it. And people who love it, and people who are honest about their skills. Because everyone can improve their skills. As long as they're being honest about where they are currently, they can always improve. So that's the type of people that I look for. Anyway, that was a long answer. Jessica Hamilton says, what don't you like about the code style? I guess that's about haiku, maybe? I'm so far behind, sorry. The main thing that I didn't like about the haiku was that they were, I think, as far as I understand it, they're kind of stuck to a very, very old version of C++ because they have this self-imposed constraint that they have to be compatible with BOS in some way. But I don't fully understand that, so maybe I'm wrong about it, but it seems to me that they're using a very old dialect of C++, and C++ has moved on. And it's a very much nicer language these days. So I hope that they find a way to use more modern C++, of course. But last time I looked at it, which was admittedly a long time ago, I saw a lot of like C++ 03, I think, like manual iterators and stuff like that, which just felt like going backwards to me. Let's see. Tim says, I got a bit delayed on the stream, but thanks for addressing my questions. Well, I'm glad you feel they were addressed, Tim. They were very good questions. And I really appreciate these types of questions that force me to think, because I don't have like canned answers to these things. I have canned answers to like, what is your plan? You know, or what is the point of building an operating system? I have a bunch of those canned answers because I've answered them so many times. But when people ask these really introspective questions, like how do you turn down a low quality contribution respectfully? That's so interesting to think about, and really important to think about. So I appreciate getting a chance to do that. Let's see. Ali says, I can't imagine not having a decently powerful home computer. Yeah, well, me neither. That's definitely something I would prefer to have for as long as possible. Fred Lecky says, do you find your knowledge of Hungarian helps you even a bit to understand Finnish? So I don't speak Hungarian very well. I have a very limited understanding of Hungarian, and I have some vocabulary, but it's not great. I can order food, maybe find my way to a hotel, and lots of random little things, but it's not super serviceable. And as such, I would say it's not really helping me with Finnish. But what is helping me with Finnish is growing up in Sweden. And I grew up in a textile town in Sweden where we had a lot of Finnish immigrants in the 1960s, because when the textile industry was booming in Sweden, a lot of young girls moved from Finland to the city where I'm from to be seamstresses and to work in manufacturing, textile manufacturing. So the end result of that is that by the time I grew up, there were all these Finnish little kids everywhere. So I grew up around a lot of Finnish people. And that definitely helps me understand Finnish a bit better. But I also know a lot of naughty words in Finnish because of that. Maybe that's actually primarily what I remember at this point. Anyway, Yuval says, hey Andreas, I am pretty new to C++ programming and I don't understand what the benefit of the smart pointers that you use on Serenity. So what is the benefit of smart pointers? The benefit of smart pointers is that you don't have to type new and delete. And it's similar to, like, if you're coming from a C background where you have to have a free corresponding to each of your mallocs, because if you don't, then you will forget the memory and it's now taking up space in your program that you can't recover. So one of the most important things about smart pointers is that they prevent memory leaks by allowing you to not worry about calling free, right? Instead, they just take care of that for you. When the smart pointer goes away, the memory is automatically freed. That's great. That is for what we call own putter. Then we also have ref putters, reference counting pointers, and they allow you to implement more sophisticated or complex ownership schemes where you have some object that has multiple logical owners. And in such cases, you don't want the object necessarily to be freed just because one pointer to it goes away. You want it to be freed when all pointers to it go away, because then nobody's using it anymore. And that's why we have ref putter. So every ref putter counts towards the lifetime of the pointed to object. And when the last ref putter goes away, we delete the pointed to object. Yeah, these guys, for multiple owner objects. And really this document here describes in pretty great detail what these individual pointers are used for, with some examples and stuff. But really they are about automatically preventing you from making very typical mistakes that are very easy to make with manual memory management. But yeah, check out that page for sure. Let's see. Virtual Fly says, hi, is there a thread pool or a job system in the operating system? If so, could you show a sample usage? So the only thing that we do have is called background action, which is what we use for some things where we have like a task that we want to run on a background thread, and then we want something to happen when that task is finished. We have background action. It's a little bit similar to dispatch on Apple platforms, but not entirely. Let's see if we can find some example of it. So for example, we use it when we create thumbnails in directory views. So when we want to fetch the thumbnail for some file system model node, then we create a background action. You can see here we call background action construct. And what you do then is you pass in two lambdas to it. The first one is sort of the worker lambda, and this is the code that will actually execute on a secondary thread. So this will run on a different thread, and whatever you return here is then passed to this lambda, and this lambda will run on the thread that you created the background action on. So now you're back on this thread again, and this callback runs here. So and the input to this, so the parameter that you get here is whatever this thing returned. So does that make sense? So you create a background action, you give it a lambda, which is some code that will run on a different thread, and then you can return something from that lambda, and whatever you return from there will be passed to this lambda on your original thread. And that's our sort of background worker API that we are using for some stuff. And it's not very flexible. It could definitely be improved in various ways, but so far it has solved the use cases that we were looking to solve. And like with everything in Serenity, we sort of grow these things organically. So as more sophisticated needs arise, we will probably have to make some more sophisticated solutions. If you have a specific thing that you would like to do that this can't do, then let's talk about that and see what we can come up with. Let's see. Big Smoke CIC says, you can solve the problem from first principles, but it's possible you won't find the cleanest solution. Right, so if that's in reference to programming interviews, solving problems from first principles, I think programming interviews are dialogues, right? Like you're having a conversation with somebody about programming, and you're sort of using the code to drive the conversation. And when you sketch out the first solution to a problem, sure, it's not going to be the cleanest one at first. Like most people don't write perfect code from the beginning. At least I certainly don't. But that's part of the interview process, I think. Like you write out some crappy first principle solution, and then you talk to each other about like, okay, so this works, but how can we make it better? What are the flaws of this approach? And the typical thing that you might get asked in an interview is like, okay, well, what if you get this input? Then what happens? And do you see what the problem is with this particular usage pattern? And how can we change the code to handle that case better? Now, sometimes you run out of time in interviews. In fact, you always run out of time, but sometimes you just run out of time before you can make a great solution to something. And that doesn't mean the candidate is bad. Somebody being slow doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that they're slow. And you have to practice like picking up on the difference, I guess, between somebody who's just a little bit slower versus somebody who's actually bad. But yeah, I think that it should be an iterative process. Like if somebody makes a perfect implementation of an interview question immediately, then I would just be suspicious that they've memorized the solution. At least whenever I solve some problem I've never seen before, and I solve it sort of in real time, the first solution is never perfect, and it has to be discussed and like investigated and like, okay, so how can we improve this? You know, stuff always comes up. I mean, you can see that in hundreds of my videos where I make something and then I sort of realize that it has some little issue, and then we remake it. And then the stuff that's not in the video is that other people see my video and then they think of ways that we can improve that. And it goes back and forth, and we organically improve the code. But that's an important aspect of programming interviews, I think, is that iterative process, because you also see how is this person at handling input or criticism, and like, can they work together on improving something? And all of these things are important to find out about the candidate as well. Let's see. Humberto says, what's currently your least favorite thing about the project / operating system? My least favorite thing about the operating system? I don't know. Maybe the fact that the multi-core support is still unstable. That's probably the main thing I feel guilty about, is not spending more time, not like investing myself into improving that. The fact that we still run single core by default is, it's a little bit silly. We have all the multi-core stuff. It just needs some investment into stability, and I could totally make that investment. I just keep postponing it for other stuff. And maybe that's something I don't like about myself and my approach to Serenity, rather than something I don't like about Serenity. But that's the first thing that comes to mind. Ecopic says, I recently applied for a job, did some technical tests, and they asked me to have a call with them in a few days. What do you think they will ask me? Well, I have no idea what they will ask you, but it sounds like a good thing if they want to have a call with you, because if they were going to turn you down, they could do that by email, right? So just be yourself, be honest, and things are going to be okay. Really, in general in life, if you just tell the truth, then you're going to get the best possible outcome in the end, I think, long-term speaking. So it really is as simple as that. But regardless, good luck. I hope that it works out well. Sharnigan Ninja says, do you always love programming? I find that I really like it one day and I hate it on others. And it just cycles like this. I think I always love programming, yes. But I definitely get tired of being stuck. I think that's the thing that I don't like, is being stuck. And whenever that happens, I guess I kind of, you can think of that as not liking programming, but I really just don't like being stuck. If I get unstuck, the moment I get unstuck, I love everything again. So maybe it's the same for you, maybe it's something else. I think if your problem is similar to mine, that you just hate being stuck, the best thing you can do is to just get more experience. Just practice more and you won't get stuck as often, and you are going to just generally have a better time. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce this. Let's look it up. Pilgrimage. I mean, that's maybe not how to say it, but I guess that's what it means. It's a cool name. Says, what do you think about Rust? It has package system, built-in move, and so on, like C++ without legacy stuff. I have not written more than 100,000 lines of Rust, and as such, I don't really have an opinion about the language worth hearing. I have written more than 10,000 lines of Rust, so I do have some opinions about the language, but I don't think they're worth hearing. Maybe one day I will have an opinion worth hearing, but at the moment my opinion is too immature to hear, so I will spare you having to listen to it. Samuel says, I follow your advice. I start soon to contribute open source project. I want to start with the GNOME desktop environment. That's fantastic. I love that. I think participating in a big open source project is just such a great way to get better at programming. There's no way you won't get better at programming by joining something like the GNOME project. You're going to learn so much. And my main advice, I guess, is to roam around in the project. Like, don't get married to one little component, but like look all over the place and see what you can find, because there's so many different components, and there's no rule that you have to limit yourself to one of them. But really, whatever you do, you're going to have a great time and learn a lot, I think. Just make sure that you join whatever chat community that they have, because participating in open source project is like 100 times better if you join the chat. So whatever chat they have, get in there and just listen to people for a bit, but get sort of integrated with the vibe. I think that makes a huge difference. Mitchell said that had to head out and actually get started on work for the day. I'm in the US, so it's morning here, but thank you for the great stream and content. Thank you for saying that, Mitchell. That is very nice to hear. Have a great day. I know you're probably not hearing this now, but I appreciate the nice words and the fact that you came here. Very, very nice. I really appreciate everybody who comes here, just to make that clear. I know you have a choice in how you spend your Fridays at 4 p.m. Swedish time, and we are very grateful that you choose to spend it with us. Let's see. Alex says, easiest way to make multi-core stable is to make it the default. Everyone will run into issues, and you'll get some PRs pretty quickly. So I feel like this is like the GRU meme, you know? This one. Whatever. Is this a good example? So you're like saying that the easiest way is to make it the new default, and then everyone will run into issues. Everyone will run into issues. But you're probably right about that. Like it would definitely flush out a lot of the problems. It's just that it's just over the line of too unstable for people to deal with it, I think. Like the fact that if you can't have like even a minute-long session without seeing a crash or a deadlock, it means that you can't like productively work on whatever you want to work on. Because 99% of people who work on Serenity, or let's say 95% of people who work on Serenity, don't want to work on multi-core stability. They want to work on something else that they care about, which is fine. But making their life significantly more annoying just so that we can flush out problems, I think it's not the right trade-off. It needs to be less intrusive, or less less irritating or whatever, so that maybe you would get a crash or deadlock after 10 minutes or something like that. But at the moment, it's too easy to get a deadlock. But if we spend some time on it, it'll get better. And I've seen a bunch of people do some stuff around this recently that hadn't worked on it before. I think Luke and Jelle both did some kernel locking patches in the last month, and I am really happy to see that. Like it's great to see new people working on synchronization and stuff like that. And I'm gonna have to tomorrow when I do the monthly update, I'm gonna have to look over everything that happened in the month, and I will be more updated on what's going on. Let's see. Obina says, hello, Andreas. Just wanted to thank you for sharing your experience. I've been inspired especially by seeing how you approach problems by starting out with something even when you aren't very sure. Yes, that is kind of a foolish superpower I have, maybe, that I'm willing to start on things even before being completely sure that I can do them. And then it somehow works out, because once you build up that momentum, you can force yourself through a lot of difficult stuff. It's just hard to do difficult things when you're standing still. You need to get going. And once you're going, you can do a lot of stuff that you might not think you can do. Jessica said that fair enough regarding older C++ for Haiku. The C++ ABI changed from GCC 2.9.5 era of BOS and GCC 4+, limiting to C++ 98 due to compiler age and bin compat. Right, yeah, so they are kind of tied down. Haiku is tied down by binary compatibility concerns, which is, it's not something I would wish on anybody. But it's a reality like you can find yourself in, and I don't know. I hope that they will eventually come to some kind of solution that allows them to use modern C++ and still vend the APIs that they want to vend or whatever, because I think they would have a glorious time with that. Let's see. Obina said, shout out from Nigeria, by the way. Ooh, hey, how's it going in Nigeria? I don't know a lot of people in Nigeria, only a handful. It's very nice to see somebody from there in here. And I'm again very glad to hear you like the approach. I think I didn't used to do things this way. It's just something I learned by seeing other people do it. So it warms my heart whenever I see somebody like throw themselves into something because they saw me throw myself into something. That is fantastic. Let's see, Shadone. Ooh, I know Shadone. I used to work with Shadone. How's it going, Shadone? I hope I'm saying your name right. It's great to see you here. Shadone says, first time seeing you live here and wanted to say thank you for everything. You might not know that, but you in fact changed my life for the better, and I appreciate it. Hello from Norway. Dude, I'm so glad to hear that. I did not realize that I had changed your life for the better. I definitely enjoyed the times that we hung out in Norway, and I'm glad to hear that you have a good time here on the channel, I guess. I hope that everything is awesome with you. And I hope that maybe one day we will work on something together again. Let's see. Samuel said, what is learn by imitation? I guess learn by imitation is when you imitate somebody else and then you learn something from the experience. Shout out from Ivory Coast. Samuel B's shouting out from Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast. That's such a cool name. Ivory Coast. Okay, I have to look at a map. Is that on the west side of Africa? Oh, yeah. I remember this from a big map that we had in elementary school. But in Swedish it's called Elfenbenskusten. That's what it said on our map. But nice to see you here as well. Very international crowd today. I guess probably every day, but this is office hours is when we actually get to hear where people are from. Let's see. Tim said, getting multi-core support stable will be a trade-off either way. More simultaneous processes means less cool time lapses. Ooh, nah, ain't that the truth? So if you saw Tim's demo on the latest thing I posted on the channel, this isn't my channel, this is JT's channel, which was the community showcase. Tim had this sweet demo where he is building Clang, and I think it was a 14-hour long build, shown here as a time lapse, of course. And if we improve multi-core support, that means that I guess we'll have to do like maybe like a 1 hour time lapse in the future instead, which wouldn't be nearly as cool as a 14-hour one. But there are other benefits to going fast, so let's not get married to the 14-hour time lapse. Mr. Smoked Turkey in Belgium and Paul in New Zealand. Look at this, people everywhere. And of course, I am still in Sweden, so got that represented. If you didn't know, by the way, we have this thing called a user map. Usermap.serenityos.org. And this is a map of people who use or develop Serenity around the world. And you can add yourself to this if you click on the link in the top right. So that would be, if anybody wants to add themselves and improve the coverage even more, that would be awesome. We already have 87 people who put themselves on here, but there's always room for more. So I put a link to that in the chat. Look at how spread out this thing is. This blows my mind, honestly. It's such a good way to visualize just how the community has expanded. That's it makes me feel something that I don't know how to describe, but it's a very, very good feeling. So if you want to add yourself to it, you can just I think you make a pull request to this repo right here. Please do that if you would like, and we'll see you on the map as well. And I think Linus manages this repo, so maybe he'll get 50 pull requests, but it'll be okay. John is in Minnesota, US. Ooh, Minnesota. And Valtteri from the remote lands of Helsinki, Finland. Wow. Look at that. All these Serenity boys and girls from around the globe. Nicholas said, do we have a profile of the Clang build? Are there single core kernel improvements to be had? Ooh, I don't have a profile personally. I'm sure that Tim could hook you up with one. I think there are absolutely single core improvements to be had for sure. Like we are, the disk cache, for example, I think we are definitely eating some amount of sand in the disk caching department. Because the way the disk cache works is that we sort of buffer up 10,000 blocks in memory, and then we burst write 10,000 blocks, and we just block the system while that happens. So you get sort of these periods where you just do burst IO, and you don't do any compilation during those times. And the reason that you don't compile is that the cache flushing mechanism effectively locks the file system, so you're unable to do file system access while there's a flush ongoing. So we could definitely improve that in many ways. For example, there's no need for the disk cache to be limited to 10,000 blocks. Like we should make it able to use as much memory as we have. Like as long as it's not needed for something else, we should probably give it to the disk cache. So that would be one thing, not having a hard limit. And then maybe we don't need to flush as aggressively as we do. Maybe we can do incremental flushing instead of having one big burst flush. There's all kinds of things that could be improved if we made flushing less aggressive, less serializing. And there are probably other things as well that could be improved. That's like the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know if Tim is still here. I remember Tim complaining about disk flushing. Maybe he had something else as well. I think if you're interested in that, get on Discord with us and we can figure out how to get a profile of the build and see what's going on. There's one kind of limitation on Serenity is that you can't make like infinitely long profiles because they use kernel buffers and they run out eventually. So you can capture like a minute or so at most, and then it starts to get uncomfortable. Let's see what he says here. Tim says that he hasn't profiled it with the intent of looking at single thread performance, but loading time for Clang also plays a part, he imagines. Yeah, that's probably an issue as well. I mean, we will hit the disk cache often, I would hope, for Clang, but if you're doing a lot of IO, even with 10,000 blocks, we'll probably have Clang itself fall out of the disk cache more than once, and you have to read it from the disk. As Andrew says here, I think the file system is a massive bottleneck for compile jobs. Yeah, I think that too. That's most likely the main bottleneck to improve. And multi-core isn't necessarily going to make compile jobs faster until we can sort of make the file system less serial. Jessica says, do I remember correctly that to speed up Git, you added some sort of caching in the VFS? That sounds familiar. I remember having a video about Git performance at some point. Yeah, that was probably adding like maybe that was even adding this cache that we are now bottlenecked on. But before that, we were even more bottlenecked. So it's just like incrementally improving something until it gets to a new pain point where you're like, oh my goodness, this is not fast enough for building Clang. Like, sure, this was fine for running Git on my local repo, but now that I want to build Clang, this cache is no longer good enough. And then we have to come up with a solution to make a better cache. And then, 2 years later, we're irritated because, well, this cache isn't good enough to run my company's network file server. Clearly, we need a better disk cache, and we come up with a better disk cache and so on. But yeah, I remember something like that too. I think that was what we did, or one of the things we did for Git performance was file system caching. Anatomiska kretsar from Sweden and Armo from South Africa. Hello, folks. And let's see. Snoodles said, hi, Andreas. I noticed when watching your coding videos that you don't write any tests. Could you talk about your philosophy on testing or thoughts on unit testing / integration testing? Cheers from Canada. And then Andrew says, Andreas lets people who care about tests write tests for him. Well, I do write tests outside of videos occasionally, but I tend to not spend time on testing in videos because I feel like it's just screws up the pace of videos. And I like to keep I like to keep the videos kind of fast paced and focused on the big ticket item that we're doing, not get bogged down with testing. This isn't necessarily representative of the development practices I always keep, but more like my video development practices. Now, I'm the first person to admit I'm not a super big test everything that I write kind of person. I like to add tests incrementally, organically, as things go. But I know there are many different philosophies on it. I think personally, I like macro tests and integration tests a lot more than unit tests. I've always been a fan of using something like libjs. Like libjs has a lot of integration tests that exercise our JavaScript implementation. And they in turn also exercise like all of our data structures and file systems and all kinds of stuff like that. And that's my favorite type of testing, I guess. Unit testing, while better at finding individual problems, I feel like unit tests usually just pass and then you forget about them. Integration tests tend to be better at flushing out problems more often. But you know, there's room for both. Like there's clearly good things about unit tests and integration tests. So in Serenity, we have both. We have lots of macro tests and micro tests. I guess that's a little bit about that. I think testing is good. It's not the most important thing in the world. Like if you don't have any software, you have nothing to test. So writing the software in the first place is clearly more important than testing it. But testing it is a close second. Let's see. Nicholas said, cool, if you've got some hints toward replicating at least part of the build for a profile capture, that would be great. And then Tim had the place to look for it. Right. Sounds like Tim is going to document it on that pull request or issue. So check that out. Anik says, hi, call my name Anik. We will call your name Anik. I hope that's okay. And TTRSS from New Zealand as well. Look at all these Kiwis just chilling. What time is it? A time in New Zealand. Is that a single time zone? Might not be. It sounds like there might be two of them. That is pretty late. You folks are pushing it a little bit. That said, I am also frequently up late, so I'm definitely not gonna judge anybody, but just be careful with your sleep. Make sure you get enough of it. Anyway, what were we talking about before I was so interested in where everybody was from? Multi-core support. Right, yeah, that was kind of the arching issue there. I don't know. Now I'm kind of curious. Like, how long would it take to get a crash if we enable multi-core scheduling? Can I spell scheduler CPP? Yes, I can. Okay, let's turn on schedule on all processors, and we will build, and then we will run. SMP on. All right. Can we get an egg timer? Well, I guess we don't need an egg timer, but okay, so far so good. We got 2 CPUs. Are we scheduling on both? Can we see some? Yes, we are scheduling on both. Okay, great. So what are we gonna do to irritate the CPU? Well, we can run some JavaScript test suite. Wow, look at it go. So yeah, as you can see, it's not choking completely, right? Like we're actually able to get the GUI going. We can run JavaScript tests, running on both CPUs. It's all very good. But how does it go if we actually run our full system test suite, I wonder? So far so good. Oh wait, now we died. Okay. Yeah, so we have a assertion failure in the kernel. What is this? Something when trying to unlock a recursive spin lock in core dumping. So we're trying to dump out a crashed process, and I think this means that we are trying to unlock a spin lock on the wrong CPU, which is definitely something we would need to debug. So really tracking down these multi-core issues at the moment is pretty straightforward. Like, you start the machine, you do run tests, and eventually it will choke on something. And then you can attach a debugger and figure out what's going wrong. Let's see. Andrew says that test-driven development enthusiasts would disagree with your features first, testing second philosophy. Aha. I'm sure they would, yes. But I think there's room for all types of philosophies in this world, thankfully. Hello, Jason. Nice to see you here. James says, "Hi Andres, you're a big inspiration to me, and watching your videos helped encourage me to start building things again and escape analysis paralysis. Thank you." Thank you for saying that. Analysis paralysis is a real bummer. That's definitely something I have a lot of experience with personally. In the past, I would just get stuck thinking, how am I going to do this? And then not actually do it. So many things. And at least for me, I would often get I would fall into this trap of first like overthinking how I'm going to do something and then not doing it. And then to make myself feel better, I would sort of tell somebody else what my idea was. And if they would say that they like my idea, then I would feel real good about myself. And then I would continue not doing it. That was not a very productive lifestyle. And nowadays, I just start random stuff, and some of it works out, some of it doesn't. But on average, it's way more productive, right? Because you end up actually making some stuff. And I think one thing I've realized is that the price of making stuff is that sometimes you make crap. And if you can just learn to accept that you're going to make crap sometimes, then you can also make good stuff. It's just a side effect of making good stuff is that you also make crap. At least I make crap. I don't know. Maybe not everybody does, but I definitely make a lot of crappy things that don't go anywhere. And that's really what helped me get out of analysis paralysis. Also, analysis paralysis is just fun to say. Analysis paralysis. Sophia said, "I'm from East Germany, if I haven't mentioned that yet." I don't think you had. Nice to have you here as well, representative from East Germany. Sophia says, "I think Serenity does some OpenGL things, right? I'm confused about how that thing works for a long time." Yes, we do have an OpenGL implementation. Now, it's a little bit different from your typical OpenGL implementation in that it's all in software. So we have, this is libgl provides the standard OpenGL API. And then we have libsoft GPU, which implements a GPU in software, basically. So these are pretty actively developed, both of these things. And I forget who started it, but like the people working on it are Stefan, Jesse, Jelle, and probably more people, but those are the names I keep seeing. And they're very active, and it's kind of interesting to see how far you can push this stuff with no hardware acceleration. So this is all software rasterization. And, you know, it's still not bad looking. Doesn't even reach 100% CPU. And I think it's, we get pretty good performance just from using SIMD instructions as well. So they've vectorized a lot of the performance sensitive code, like the texture mapping stuff. But there's always room for more improvements, of course, and potentially we could probably do some interesting stuff once our multi-core stuff is more stable. I would imagine that we could parallelize some things, but I haven't been super involved in this stuff at all, to be honest. It's just kind of their playground, and I'm real happy to have them playing on it here because it's fantastic. Anyway, Jessica said, have you ever started a video where you set out to do something but didn't succeed? Would you upload it anyway? Aha. I have definitely done that. And I didn't upload those videos because I didn't like the way I sort of got grumpy throughout the video, because it was sort of this progressive realization that this isn't going to work out. And then I just got like grumpy and real grumpy towards the end. And that's not really a vibe I wanted to put out. So was that a good decision? I don't know. Maybe it would have been a good thing to put out anyway, just to show that, like, look, this is what happens sometimes. But at the time, I just felt like I don't want to put out this cranky video of myself sitting here and being cranky. Like, that's not gonna brighten anybody's day. So I ended up deleting it because of that. I remember one where I wasn't very cranky. I was just impressed with how bad it turned out, which was before I made the user space emulator, I tried making a different type of user space emulator where we basically implemented user space emulation as a debugger, where we would just insert a breakpoint on every instruction and then look at the instruction, see if it tried to do memory access, and if so, like, intercept that memory access and do it ourselves, and then resume the process. And I recorded a video. It was like 3 hours long of me implementing that, and it was such a piece of crap. It worked, but it was just so slow. And I was just sitting there like, this thing is never going to be used for anything, and this is just such a crap. And I think at the time I felt like, if I put this out, people are going to think I thought this was a good idea. And I think I just felt, I don't know, it was almost something like vanity that made me delete it instead of publish, because at the time I felt like, oh, people are going to think I'm so stupid that I thought this was a good idea. Which is really dumb, honestly, because it's better to, like, everybody has bad ideas. You just got to try them to validate that they're bad sometimes. And that's just what I did. But yeah, I'm a bit sad about deleting that one, I guess, because it was a funny hack. Like, actually making a debugger that just stops at every instruction, messes with the memory accesses, and then resumes again. It was kind of a funny thing. Anyway, Mintzkraut says, first time catching the stream live. Hope I'm not coming in at the very end. Unfortunately, that is what you are doing. But nice to have you here regardless. Let's see. Yusef says, what advice would you give to someone about to start on the WebKit team? Oh, well, if you are about to start on the WebKit team, I would say congratulations. You are going to learn a lot from your coworkers. Make sure that you work with people on stuff. Don't get stuck in a silo, but actually interact with other people on the team and push yourself to learn from others. One of my favorite things about the WebKit team is that people who have advanced very far in management at Apple still work on WebKit for fun. Like the senior director of the whole department, like the whole Internet Technologies department, Darren, he typically in his spare time will still sit at home at night and hack on random WebKit stuff, and I love that about WebKit. It's like this project that you just have such a good time working on it. Then even if they promote your ass to like the moon, then you still end up hacking on it at night. So you want to, I guess my advice is to find the people that are hacking on it because they enjoy it so much, and try to do stuff together with them, and learn by collaborating with other people. But you're going to do all that anyway because it will be your job if you're starting on the team. But just wanted to reinforce that idea. Let's see. Armo says, I reckon grumpiness below 40% on the grumpy scale would still be okay, but not above. I would not like a video with anything above 40%. Yeah, that's a good question. Like, how grumpy do I really get? I don't get as grumpy as I imagine. When I feel really grumpy, it barely comes out. I have to get really through the roof grumpy before you'll see something that resembles anger. And that's very rare. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to put out some video where I'm like 40% plus grumpy. I don't think that would be good for anybody. Yusuf says, been lurking your channel for a while. Well, nice to have you here. And if you are indeed starting on the WebKit team, congratulations again. And you're going to have so much fun. Good luck with that. Mati says, do you prefer nested source code folder structure or flat source code folder structure? I guess nested. I mean, if you look at Serenity, which is my main project, you will find a very nested structure. Look at all these directories and subdirectories and subdirectories. If that's what you mean, I think at least when you're working on something with hundreds and thousands of source code files, you want to start putting stuff in directories, because it becomes unbearable to not nest your code base at some point. I don't know what the limit is. I guess there's probably some like good rule of thumb that, oh, if your thing has more than 20 source code files, maybe it should be in its own directory, or maybe it should be in a submodule or library or whatever. I don't know. I don't have numbers. You just kind of, I guess it's more about functionality boundaries. But yeah, I definitely prefer nesting. If you put all of Serenity into one folder, it would be very irritating to try to tab complete names, for one thing. Let's see. Valtteri needs to hop off. Happy weekend, everyone. Well, I need to hop off as well, so I'm going to wrap it up here. So I definitely want to thank everybody for coming to office hours this week. I really, really appreciate the company and all the questions, super chats, all of that stuff. So good to have you here week after week. Let me once again plug the user map if people want to go ahead and add themselves to that, because that would be really fun to see more pins on the map. But yeah, thank you all for coming. And as I always say, if you end up working on Serenity this weekend, then come to our Discord server and let's talk about what you're working on. Share some screenshots, stuff like that, and I'll see you next time. Bye.